The session lecture this afternoon is geared towards effective communication. Because in coaching our kids, effective communication is absolutely critical. From the three you saw today, anything that you would take away from their communication styles, were they different, the three? Yes. Yes. Were all three effective? For sure. For sure. What were the things that you took away communication-wise that you thought were effective on any of them? Yes.
You don't have to say anything. Just let the players play and learn for themselves.
Sometimes it's okay not to talk. Sometimes it's okay not to talk. And we'll start with that one because I think that's a great one. Because as coaches, we want to coach, don't we? We want to influence. We want to change. So we have this nature within us to want to correct things. So how do we correct? We want to tell them this is what they need to do. Now, how many have been here? And I would say I've been here. The game is going on, and you're on the sidelines, standing on the sidelines, and every play you're talking it through. Pass it here, talk. Now back. Now push it here and press. Now pass it. Now shoot. And you're playing every play. How many have been there? I've been there. Absolutely. So we play every play for every play. And we're trying to solve every situation for every player. Now, when we do that, eventually what happens is the players then look over, waiting for some direction of how to solve the problem. And now if this happens in training, as well as the game, we create an environment and a culture where they're waiting for you to solve the problem for them. The quote I love is do we prepare the path for the child, or do we prepare the child for the path? Because if we're going to solve every problem for them, we're preparing a path. And then they're never really going to be prepared to solve the problems on their own. And especially if that path deviates a little bit. Are they going to have the confidence and self-image to say, look, I can take care of this? That I can handle it because you know what? I've been in difficult situations and I may not have gotten it right the first time, but I had that responsibility and the will and the confidence to try to solve it and learn from the experience. Learning from the experience is where the coaching comes in. There's a book called Well Done. I don't know if I mentioned it the last time I was here or if you've heard of it. But it's a book about how they train killer whales and SeaWorld. And what they do is they take these animals that are considered the most dangerous predators in the sea, and what they do is they put them in captivity. And then they train them to do whatever they want. And here's how they do it. What they do is if they want them to jump over a rope outside of the water, what they do is they put the rope in the beginning about 10 meters off the bottom of the tank. And every time it swims over it, they love it and hug it and feed it. And then they raise the rope another 10 meters, and every time it swims over it, they love it and hug it and feed it. And pretty soon they have the rope about 10 meters outside the water and jumping over it. You know why? It wants to be loved and hugged and fed. Now, if they swim under it, what they don't do is whip it. You know why? They'll be eaten. What they do is they redirect their behavior. This is where the coaching comes in. They redirect their behavior so they can catch them doing it right. And then they love them and hug them and feed them. How do we love and hug and feed our kids? Most times in our work. When Mario did the first session, how I started counting how many times he said good. Good, well done, good, good. And then a couple of times he would say, yeah, opposite foot, played off the opposite foot, turn, good, good, good. And catching it. And rewarding the players in our words. Our words, they have the power. I think it was Jim Rohn that said, Jim Rohn's he's just passed away not too long ago, famous motivational speaker and writer, tremendous insight and philosophies on life. And he said, you know, our words have almost the power of God. They have the power to give life and take it away. They have the power to raise somebody up or pull somebody down. And in our words, how do we shape our words to shape the kids, to shape the players? And so much has to start with who we are. Because there's a tendency sometimes that we use the words to pull the kids down because of who we are. There's a story about these black crabs in Hawaii, the indigenous to Hawaii. And these black crabs, they were all captured, milling around on the bottom of the bucket, just waiting to be eaten. They're a delicacy in Hawaii. Well, one of the crabs looks up and he sees that there's light over the top of the bucket. So he puts one claw up there and he strains to get himself over the top of the bucket. And he sees that there's light. He sees that there's life. He can't believe it. It's freedom. So he looks down to the rest of the crabs. He says, you wouldn't believe what's up here. This is freedom. It's life. It's the beach. It's the ocean. So he puts his claw down to reach the rest of them up and hold them up and grab them up and get them out. And the crabs all reach up and they pull them back down into the bucket. And there's times where we, in our lives, not just as coaches, but as husbands and parents and friends, that where we are in our insecurity, that we pull people back down to where we are to feel better about ourselves rather than lifting people up to a better spot. And you can only imagine with our kids, with our players, of how critical that is that we don't pull them down, but rather build them up. Do they need correction? Absolutely. They need correction. They need redirection. But they need to be shaped in the words. There's a guy who's a famous painter, Italian painter. His name, I'll get it for you in a second here. Gabriele Rossetti. Dante Gabriele Rossetti. Famous Italian painter. And there was an older man that approached him one time and he said, you know, I'd really like you to look at some paintings and give me your opinion. I put these paintings, older gentlemen. So he looked at the paintings and Dante had to be very honest with me. He looked at him and he said, look, I understand this is a passion for you, but quite honestly, there's no talent in these paintings. I wouldn't suggest you continue to pursue it. And he said, well, while you're here, can I show you another group of paintings? All right. So he said, for sure. While I'm here, I'll entertain that. And he brought in another group of paintings and he looked at the paintings and he said, wow. Now, whoever created these has some talent. Whoever created these needs to stay with it. Is this your son? Because I'd like to talk to him. And he said, no. He said, those were mine that years ago I created. And if I had your encouraging words then, I would have continued. But I never did. And that talent that I once had is no longer there, obviously. So I ask you to think about that. That the encouraging words, those words that we use in our coaching world, in what we do, and I would take it further, in our lives, with our own kids, with our family, of how do we use our words to help create an environment, to help build people up, to help them reach higher levels, and especially at a young age where there's so much ahead of them. And encouraging words as well, I will tell you, aren't always coming in a way that are sweet and gentle. But encouraging words can sometimes come in truth. We had a player at the University of Louisville, Marlon Hairston, who just signed a GA contract. first-round draft pick. He's now with Colorado. And one of the things we do with our guys is that we sit down and we goal set with them at the beginning of the semester. And as we goal sit with them, part of what we do is help them, encourage them to see beyond where they are. And one of the things Marlon said to me, he said, I want to play for the under-20 national team. So I said, Marlon, this is great. It was in January. I said, wonderful. A year ago this was. I said, that's wonderful, Marlon, but right now, they're actually in qualifying. They already have the team together. The only way that can happen is if they qualify. But if they qualify, and when they do, I'll call Tab Ramos. I know Tab, and I'll call him on your behalf and see if we can get you at least a look for the under-20s. So a month goes by, and in the meantime, they qualify for the World Cup. It's now in the middle of February, and training's been going on for us for about a month, and Marlon's attitude is poor, a bit cynical. His work ethic isn't very good. So I called him up, and I said, Marlon, I apologize. I apologize because I know in our meeting, our goal-setting meeting, I told you I called Tab on your behalf. But based on where you are right now, your attitude isn't very good, your work ethic isn't very good, you're not even one of the best guys that we have in training on a daily basis. I can't call, because if I call him now and you show up in that kind of a state, I'll never be able to call Tab again. I apologize, but it is the way it is. The next day in training, he was unbelievable. And for the rest of the spring, he was clearly our best guy. So I got to the point I had to call Tab. And I called Tab, and they had him into a camp. He was the last guy to come in. He did so well, they took him into France for the event right before the World Cup, the Under-20 World Cup. He got injured just before they were supposed to go to Turkey for the World Cup. Otherwise, he would have made the team. So the word of encouragement wasn't necessarily, yes, well done, keep going. It was, Marlon, there is more there. That there is more in you. And there's more that you expect of yourself because of what we partner in your goal setting for you to attain. So encouragement isn't always just well done and hey, let's go, but it's also the truth sometimes of saying this is where you wanted to go and this is what you wanted to do and this is where you need to be to do that. And those as well can be very encouraging words. All right. Where else? And from that was a long addition to yours about what you took from the communication of not saying anything. Sometimes it's okay not to say something. And one last quick story before we get on to others. I was at a camp, and Matt might have been at this as well. I was at the Under-14 national team camp, and a mentor of mine, a good friend, Manny Shelscheid, was running the Under-14 national team camp. I was the Under-15 national team coach at the time. And we were evaluating the kids. I was helping him evaluate them, and he said, Ken, come here, I want to show you something. Manny is always about lessons. So he brings me over, and one of the coaches is just getting ready for halftime. Just getting ready for halftime. And he said, watch this, Ken. Watch what happens. He gathers the kids together, and he starts talking to the kids. As soon as they sat down, he started talking to the kids. And he continued to talk to the kids. And continue to talk to the kids, and continue to talk to the kids, under 14s, for 10 minutes straight. Gesturing, talking to them the whole bit, and then the whistle blew, let him go. This guy was, at one point, our Under-20 national team coach. And he said, Ken, at no point did he stop talking. He's trying to impart every wisdom on the game that he knows to these kids in 10 minutes. And after 2 or 3 minutes, they've shut him out. They stopped listening to him. He said at halftime, how does he have any idea what they've seen in the first half, what they're thinking, what they've seen, and how they feel? And it hit me. And I watched this and I said, wow. And my halftime, and how we handle halftime for us, from that point, completely changed. Because it was no longer about me. It was about them. And part of communication is how can we impart wisdom if we don't know what they're feeling and where they're at? At halftime for you, at halftime, how many ask questions first. Probably a good way to go. When we get in with our guys, the first thing we ask is, what do you see? What's going on out there? Who are their best guys? Who are their weakest guys? What's working? What's not working? Because unless we know how they're feeling and what they're seeing, we can't impart anything. And what we might say might be inappropriate for where they are. The communication has to come of understanding, yes, who they are.
What typically do you think is going on, and they said, what area of the game do you always have the opposite view, or maybe not on the same thought?
You know, it varies. There's some games where what they say is exactly what we think needs to be addressed. But then there's other times where when they speak, you know, it's like, oh my goodness. You know, we weren't thinking that coming in. We didn't anticipate that that's how they were going to feel or what's going on in their mind. And had we not asked, we could never address it. And there's many times it's not even tactics. It's simply how they feel. We're overwhelmed. Or I don't understand why, you know, we can't stop or what's going on, and confused sometimes. But we can't address it unless we know. And we sometimes going in thinking we have all the solutions. We solved all the problems already going in. But we don't know until we ask. And of course the questions are the answers. You know, knowing what questions to ask so that you get proper feedback so that you can, you know, handle that. There's a wonderful book called Leadership and Self-Deception. If you have a pen and a paper, I would suggest writing it out. Leadership and Self-Deception. Has anybody heard of that before? It's by the Arbinger, I think Arbinger Institute wrote it. And it, what it basically says is sometimes we lead from our own perception in life. That we never consider the perception of the people that we're trying to lead. That we view it only through our own eyes, our own feelings, our own experiences. And it's very difficult to provide leadership if you don't understand your players. If you don't understand where they are, what they're feeling, what they're seeing. It's so important for us to be, again, effective leaders, that we have that understanding. And a lot of that is simply knowing your players, knowing who you're leading, and again, knowing your feeling. A lot of that then comes out of questions, asking. All right, what's going on? How are you feeling? What do you see? And then making adjustments accordingly. Here's the instance, quite honestly, that inspired me to prepare this talk for you today. Was we had a situation this year at the University of Louisville. I'll try to paint the picture for you. Go back a little bit. We have a number of players. I think it was about 13 new players into our team. Over half the team was new this year, whether freshman or transfer. So they're coming into a situation where the last 3 years for our program, we were in a national final, Elite Eight, Elite Eight. So you have over half the team coming into a situation where for the last 3 years we were probably as successful as any program in the country. And they're coming in experienced, and many of them, freshmen, never played in the NCAA tournament. The transfers never played in the NCAA tournament. And having this responsibility of now what's gone on with our program and maintaining that, especially when they come in, we're talking about winning a national championship. So we're preparing the season and helping prepare and acclimating them to the culture that we've created and our expectations. In the first game of the season, we're playing Virginia. Virginia was in the Final Four this year. And we go to Virginia, we win the game 2-1. And with that 2-1, you can almost feel a little bit of, you know, within the team. A little bit of, you know what, we're okay. We're okay. We come back, we win the next game against Cleveland State. Not a very strong team, we won it 2-0, and justly so. The next game we played Butler. And Butler was a team that was a good team. And I thought on the day we had the better of the game, but ended up losing the game 1-0. Really didn't create enough good chances, but we lost the game. And afterwards probably could have justified the fact that we had more possession, maybe some of the better chances, and should have and could have won the game. So we're 2-1 at that point. The next game, we lose to UC Irvine. And again, a good team. I believe they were in the Sweet 16 this year as well. And at that point in the season, now we're 2-2. Lost the game 1-0. They get a goal late, and they deserved the game, quite honestly. At home, it was the first time, and I couldn't tell you how many years that we lost 2 games back-to-back at home, much less in a row. So now we're going into a Sunday game. This was Friday, having lost 2 in a row, 2-2, and you can kind of feel this pressure mounting. You know, the intensity of it all. So we get to the next game is UC Bakersfield. They come in, and in the first half of us really probably having the better of the play, we're down 2-0 at halftime. 2-0. So we lost 2 straight, 2-2. Expectations of winning a national championship. And now we're walking off the field 2-0 down. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? As a coach, you're handling that. You tell me what's going through your mind and what your halftime talk would be. Any thoughts? Really, maybe the season's in the balance. Any thoughts? What would you guys say? Simplify the game. Get back to the basics.
Ask them if they need to be motivated or what they, it's gut check that.
Gut check.
That's still the goal of ours, or you want to?
Challenging. Challenging.
It seems like it's, what are you scared about? What are you afraid of? What are you, there's expectation, it's kind of like expectations or carrying expectations, like they're afraid of letting you down, the program down, something like that.
I'm talking about working through it, and don't worry about the result, just hard work.
And I'll tell you what, that's an easy thing to say as well. For me, I'm coaching and I'm thinking, don't worry about the result. We already lost 2 in a row, and we're down 2-0, and the third one. Yeah, no, and you know what? And truthfully, we train that way. That we say to them that when we do things in a certain way, the results will take care of themselves. For sure. Any other thoughts? Yes.
How about looking at the positive things? What we did in the first half.
Yeah.
That we're so successful, but at the end of the day, two down. But focusing on the
I
positive.
hate to say when people say have fun, but they're obviously playing stress.
Ooh, yeah. And you can see it. Was anybody at the game? We had one at the game. And what did it look like in the first half? It looked like tight, didn't it? It looked tight. It looked stressful.
Sometimes you talk about playing not to lose rather than playing to win. And when you have that expectation so high, you think you can't lose.
Absolutely.
So that thought process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're not going to win a national championship in that game right there. You can't do anything about the past. You've got to see in that moment in the next 45 minutes. So,
Good. Good. That's very good.
Use some humor maybe to try to lighten the mood for the first minute or two, just to try to get.
I gotta tell you, I was in no mood for you.
Everyone does something different, though, all right?
I appreciate it.
I'll try to humor everyone else in here.
We do we score a goal, we win the game.
Yeah.
You put one in yours.
I'll tell you what, some good ideas. I wish I talked to you before. Good idea. So here's, you want to know what happened? Okay. So the first thing is I'm the first guy off the field. I mean, the clock didn't even hit 0, and I was off the bench, and I was already in the conference room, or not in the conference room, in the car park. Right? And what we do is we go into a conference room, and in halftime, where we have set up like a classroom, basically, where the guys have chairs and tables and a blackboard, so if we need to go over anything, or a whiteboard, we go over it. So I was the first one out, and my mind was absolutely racing. And a little bit of anger, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of disappointment. And the first thing I did was I went right for our locker room. And I went into the locker room, and I simply sat down on my stool, and we have 15 minutes for halftime. 15 minutes. So I ended up taking what seemed like quite a long time. And I simply sat down, and I gathered myself. And here's, I think, a very important thing that I don't think 5, 10 years ago I would have taken that time. But in an emotional game, in an emotional sport, how important that we communicate to our players from a place of calmness, of peacefulness, of clarity. That as soon as the emotion of anger comes into it, it's very difficult to give concise and precise and good communication. So I simply sat there and breathed for a little bit, because my chest was tight coming off the field. So I gathered myself, and I knew at that point that attacking the players wasn't the way to go. Because what I knew is this about our guys, is they wanted to win. They did. I knew that. We had been together enough to know that these guys wanted to succeed. How many of your players that you have would you say they want to succeed? Is that a good starting point? Now the question is, how do we help them succeed? How do we get them out of whatever situation they are, whatever they're feeling right now, and put them in a place, whether it's tactically, technically, or emotionally, where they have a chance to succeed? And it was just about that at halftime. It was one of the few times that I really didn't ask a question that I didn't know the answer to. Because I asked him, the first question I asked was, what are you scared of? What are you fearful of? And there was no answer. There really wasn't any answer, but I knew the answer. I had a pretty good idea of what the answer was. And then the rest of the talk was about relieving them of that fear. The analogy I used, I said, look, we're like a wounded soldier. We've been cut. You know, we've been cut, and we're standing there kind of looking at ourselves as we're bleeding, dying, and not doing anything about it. We're simply receiving it. And it's our responsibility that if we have a big enough dream, that if what we want to pursue and what we want to become is big enough, that we need to take action. And that we need to do something. Because right now, the fear has us so paralyzed that it's difficult to move. It's difficult to breathe. And there's no chance for us to be successful if we're having chains of fear on our ankles. We have to release the chains collectively and pursue it. And I left them, after a little bit more dialogue, left to themselves, which gave them a chance to kind of encourage each other, lift each other up. And what happened in the second half was this. It was quite interesting. And this changed our season, quite honestly. What happens in the second half, we start and we score a restart goal within the first minute of play. Was that right, Charlie?
Yeah.
First minute of play, we get a restart goal. So we're 2-1. And now, certainly, like there's some encouragement. Yes, some belief. And we got after it right from the start. I mean, we were pressing it right from the start. You could see the energy levels. They were getting after it. About 2 or 3 minutes later, it wasn't yet 5 minutes into the half, our captain it's red card. Red card. So now, 2-1, and now for the rest of the half, we're playing a die down. Well, we ended up winning the game 4-2. And it was that moment that propelled us forward, that we went on a, I think it was 7 games straight, 8 games straight, that we went unbeaten. And we rose as high as in the top 10 in the country in the rankings, and ended up getting into the second round of the NCAA tournament. So there was that moment there where, quite honestly, our season was very much in a balance. And quite honestly, I don't take the credit for changing it all around, but I will say this, as coaches, it's so important to know where they are, to know what information to give them. And if we don't have that feeling, and we don't understand them, and we aren't having a relationship with them that we can understand that, then it's very difficult to give them the right directions and the right information. All right. Before the game, what does it look like for you guys? So we take care of halftime. We talk a little bit about practice. We talk a little bit while the game's going on. Before the game, communicating with your players, what does that look like? Tell me, you're getting them ready for a game. What would it look like for you guys?
I'm talking to them individually, encouraging them, reminding them things, places where they need to be, where they need to stay, and maybe like units, defense, midfield, forwards, small things to say, do with each other.
So a part of that is talking with individual players or groups of players. Good. Anybody else? Your pre-game. Yes.
I certainly want to mirror the energy that you want the kids to go on that field with. Excited.
And in your words, you know, it's so interesting. In big games when I was younger in my career, the nervousness I felt, that energy was exuded to the team. You know, whether it was the nervousness of my words or the movement of my body, but don't you think kids can sense that? Yes? And it's so important that, again, as coaches, that we want to portray what they should be feeling. That assertiveness, that confidence, that focus in what's going on. That if there is a big game that we're preparing for, that we're not, you know, stuttering over our words or a little bit unsure, or talking more about the other team than we are about ourselves and how strong they are. And, you know, now they got this guy and that guy, and oh, how are we going to stop these guys? You know? Very good point. What else? In pregame.
Set a few game goals. We always try to set a few game goals.
Much like halftime, if you give them a plethora of things to think about, how many do you think they'll be able to keep? Not very many. And again, early in my career, I would speak for, 10 minutes because it made me feel better. That, look, I checked them all off. I covered them, and they should have it because I made sure that we covered every situation. There's nothing that's going to happen that I didn't cover. But how much of it did they receive? Very little. So can you hit them in bullet points? Maybe 3 things that, look, if we do this today, these 3 things, we're going to have a really good chance. Just these 3 things or 2 things or whatever it might be, that they can easily say, yeah, these are the things that we got to get done. When you give them a list, a laundry list of things, they'll probably not remember any of it. So again, in that talk, that you make it concise and precise, and just 3 things. What else?
Discuss things that you're familiar with. Don't do a bunch of new things that we're getting ready on the field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep it consistent. Keep it consistent. Before the game is not the time to say, oh, by the way, we're going to shift and we're going to not play in a 4-4-2 today, but we're going to play in a... And all of a sudden, the anxiety of, we've never seen that. We've never done that. And now the anxiety that comes up of having not ever seen it. So again, the time to introduce those things are in training to let them become acclimated and introduced to it, not right before the game as well. Yes?
Try to get some with some key guys one-on-one during warm-ups. So they're busy doing that so it doesn't feel like we're having this big deep conversation, but do some of that halftime, what are you feeling, what are you thinking, what do you think are some keys for you in the game, and then trying to give them some self-talk, some props that they can give themselves if it gets tight or if it gets whatever, that they can kind of coach themselves since I'm not in their ear.
And knowing your players, those individual conversations are so huge and so important. Collectively, anything else collectively that you would do with your group, anything that might help. Look, it might help all of us. That you have some ideas of ways of preparing for the game. Here's our routine. Would you like to know our routine?
Yes.
Our pregame routine. The first thing we do when we do this, you'll see this tomorrow, because we do the same thing for training that we do for the games. The same rhythm. We'll come in, and the first thing that we'll do is 3 minutes of breathing, just meditation. That the kids get used to, just, as you can imagine in some big games, that there's a nervousness to what they're doing, so there's just a breathing to calm them down and get centered a little bit. All right, so we'll do that first and foremost. Then what we'll do is simply go over the lineup and then hit from attacking, defending, and restarts, usually 3 points on each. You know, that are important for the game, that may have tweaked a little bit, but just 3 points on each that we know. That it all stems from maybe possession, what the possession needs to look like, pressing, what that needs to look like specific to the team, and then restarts. Those 3 areas that we'll hit on. All right? We will go over our restarts to make sure that they all know where they're supposed to be, just a reminder, and then we're out. The meeting takes probably about 5 minutes, Charlie, beginning to end. We use a PowerPoint to help with the restarts. And then a quick, remember, these are some of the things that we're working on during the course of the week. And again, it's not overloading them, but giving them precise, concise. All right? End of the game. Game's over. Now what does the communication look like?
Win or lose.
The question is win or lose. Should it matter? I open that up. Should it matter? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
That's me.
Depends on how you lost.
That's me. I don't say much after the game.
He says don't say much after the game. And I heard, what's that?
Provided they show.
Provided they show some effort. Yeah.
Well, there's always things they did well and didn't do well, whether they won or lost. So you focus on the next practice from those 3 or 4 things.
Anybody else? Thoughts? Yes.
What about going over the 3 things that you brought up in your pregame and kind of saying whether or not you reach or you hit your objectives?
Good. Good. Yeah. Yes.
I would say where you're at in the season, how close you are to your next game. Those would be some factors that you would take in.
Good. Good. If you're finishing on Friday, you have a game on Sunday, maybe that's different than if you played on Saturday, you don't play to the next Saturday. Maybe how you handle it a little bit differently. Good. Good. Here's some things that, in my experience, some things that I found to be helpful. One is I really don't criticize too much after the game. That I try very hard not to say anything that emotionally, that you can't take back. Once words leave your lips, it's like that arrow that you let go, you can't get it back. And I know for me that my words, sometimes that I said that night or right after the game, I had the chance to reflect on it, maybe watch video, and now it's a completely different perspective. Now it's changed. Maybe because I slept on it a little bit, maybe talk to some other people, coaching staff, that we had some time to talk about it and shape it. And so again, for me, try not to be overly critical. State facts, maybe what happened, some things where we were, but not be too critical of it. And wait to the next opportunity that we got together to critique the game. To actually get there, because again, understand how emotional they are, whether they won or lost, how emotional they are, because tendencies are this, that when you win the game, how much better was every pass? Right? They're looking at it like, yeah, everything was great, we just won. And when you lose, that nothing was good. right? It was very difficult to find and pull out the good things. So we don't shape that part of it. What we did start doing was this, and we have the ability to do this, is from the time the game ends, we have about 30 minutes before we feed the guys before they go home. And we started getting them together afterwards and actually shaping their thoughts. Because as you can imagine this, that if you've won the game, now their thoughts are going to be such, whatever that might be. And especially for some young guys of, oh, man, we did really great, we were wonderful, and for the next maybe 24, 36, 48 hours that we don't see them, they're marinating on those thoughts. Had we lost, it might be, oh, we're horrible, and now this is, there goes our season, and now for the next 24, 36, 48 hours, they're marinating on those thoughts. So we took that opportunity 30 minutes after of shaping their thoughts for the next 24, 36, 48 hours. And shaping them in a way that it had to be one of making sure that they stayed focused on where we were going, of what the next step was, that they were already tuned in to the next thing that was coming. Had we lost, we talked about, again, many times of look, where we were in the season, and there's so much more ahead of us. And prepare their thoughts so they weren't so negative, but more looking forward and expectation and positive. Because again, their thoughts, as I know it, their thoughts have energy. And if we're not with them in the next 24, 36, 48 hours, how that can wear on their mental state and their emotional state as we go forward in the season. So again, our words have the power to do that. And you as a leader have the ability to shape that. And again, I encourage you to use your words in such a way that you continue to shape not only the team, but the individual players as well. There's a quote from Michelangelo that said, in every block of marble, I see a statue as plain as though it stood in front of me, shaped and perfect in attitude and action. I have only to hew away the rough walls that imprison the lovely apparition to reveal it to all others to see. And really, that's what we're doing, is we're taking these players and we're shaping them. We're shaping them in our coaching, but especially in our communication and our words. All right. One of I don't think he's here. Brad Davies. I don't think he's here. I think he had to leave for lunch. But he's a wonderful guy to watch coach young people. And in his coaching of young people, he's a master at asking questions. And because he's come from an educational background, he understands how to teach. So he gets, my son was one of them, Elijah, he's coaching, and actually my oldest son, Tyler, as well. But I love watching him coach. He gets the kids together, and constantly he asks them questions. Now, okay, what do you see? And what is the next step? And and he allows them time, and this is great because he allows them time to raise their hand and say, yeah, I know the answer, but he doesn't pick the first guy. Why? Because for some, it takes a little bit longer to process. Then in asking the question, it takes a little bit longer for one guy to process, and if he calls him and he answers it, that guy that maybe it takes a little longer to process never gets there. And never gets a chance to solve it and figure it out in his own mind, which is so important. So he asks the question, maybe even asks it twice, waits for a number of guys to put up their hands and only ask one of them. But how important is that for our kids that we ask the right questions and give them the opportunity to figure it out constantly? Mario said that earlier. Let the game be the teacher. Guide them in what we're doing. Don't give them all the answers. Prepare the child for the path and not the path for the child. In our words, it's so important that we do that in our communication. All right? And any other questions that you might have on the communication or what we do or any thoughts on it? Yes?
Say you dropped the game to Bakersfield, how would you have shaped your team's thoughts post-match? Say it finished 2-1 or 3-2 or something.
Cut the whole team. We would have started.
Not humor, I know.
Yeah, you know, I think it would have been much the same of handling that stress that comes with that, you know, and trying to alleviate the stress to allow them to perform and pursue something, and taking that away from them. Because again, the fear is a powerful, dangerous thing, and it's manufactured in our own mind. We create our own fear. You know, and it's dealing with that fear every single day that shackles us, that doesn't allow us to be at our best. You know, the analogy I've used with many teams is it's kind of like this: is you have a plank of wood, maybe 12 feet long, and it's 4 inches wide, and we tell our kids, now look, if we put a pot of gold or $1 million on the other side and put it on the ground here, and asked you just to walk on a plank of wood so that you didn't fall off one side or the other, if you got to the end, you'd have the pot of gold and money yours. How many would chance doing that in this room? How many would take that chance? For sure. Yeah, we all would. Yeah. But now we put it 100 stories up. And it sits on one building, nothing in between, and 12 feet away it's on another building. And it's the same $1 million and the same pot of gold, same board. But now our muscles get a little bit tighter. You know, our heart starts beating a little bit faster. It's tough to breathe. And now those steps that were so steady and sure, all of a sudden become a little bit wobbly. Because our mind no longer is focused on the goal or the money, but that 100, you know, stories in between. And that's the difference. You know, how do we help our players get the focus off of the fear and on the pursuit, you know, of whatever the goals are. And that's why goals are so important, of setting a direction, a purpose for what we're doing. Yes?
How do you ensure consistent communication among your coaches?
We meet every day. We meet, and we can do that. But we have a staff meeting every day. And there's certain things that we cover, players as well as training, and a number of different things that we cover. You know, for us, I think we're special for us that Tina wonders, really, do I work or I just go to hang out with my friends all day? If you see us hanging around each other, it's a bunch of guys that like each other. You know, so to get communication going, it doesn't take much. Would you say that's true, Charlie?
Absolutely.
Joe? Yeah. That it's, you know, the staff meetings are a pleasure to be at, and everybody wants to be in it because of the rapport that we have. And in your coaching world, the one thing I would recommend is probably most everybody in this room is not getting rich doing it. Association is so important because you can get wealthy in association and what it offers you. So if you're going to do it and associate with good people. Because there's two things in life that dictate who you become. One is what you read, and that's why we're giving these books out. I'm a big believer in that. The other thing is who you associate with. Those two things in life will dictate who you become more than anything else. So for you, you know, in your coaching, it's one of the reasons why we are having success here at the University of Louisville is because of associations, bringing guys like Charlie back into the program, and having guys like Joe Salem and Danny and Mario, and even you know, David Horn, and even to the point of you can ask Zach here, who's our manager, and I'll let you, you know, talk if you wouldn't mind. He didn't know he was going to talk, but he's been with us. He's been with us since August. He's been with us since August. He's a manager. Do you want to tell him how your life's changed?
Sure. I mean, I've just adopted whatever Ken's been talking about with goal setting and whatnot. I've started reading books, personal development. One of my goals, which I think he's referring to, is weight loss. I came in at 235. I had a goal to get down to 200 in February. I'm at 201 right now. And then I got 180 next August, so I'm going to try to get to.
It's not only that. He cut his hair. Yeah. Right? And then he shows up. What?
What's the GPA?
GPA is
3.88.
3.88, and then he shows up the other day in at training, and he's in our first meeting, and he's dressed, and he's got a collared shirt and nice slacks and shoes on, and the guys are going, Zach! You know, his name is Wiz. He's the Wiz. So I say, Wiz, man, look at you. What's going on? And here's this transformation since August that has happened right before our eyes. And it's simply by hanging around with guys like that. You know, guys of a high standard. So again, the message to you is what is it that you are setting for your team? What's the standard by which if somebody comes into that culture that they are spit out 4 years later, looking different, talking different, and people go, who are you? You know, and there's a little bit of that Tina walked in one time and she said, I thought he was one of the guys, one of the players, because he looked different. I didn't notice him so much, right? What is the culture you're creating? What is it that when people come in that they're changed by the association? So, long answer to your question. Yes?
How are you handling hyper parents? What's your philosophy and recommendation?
We don't talk to them. One first, I think first and foremost, even with the youngest of players, the key is having the conversation with the kids first. I'm not saying that you can't have, because even at our level, I still have conversations with the parents, because if the parents have questions about what's going on, I'm very free, and it's easy because we're very transparent. That we're very honest in what we're telling the kids. That what I tell the kids, I can tell you, I can tell their parents, I can tell anybody, that it's not hidden. It's honest, it's true. It may not be exactly how they see it or how they feel, but all we can do is give them communication based on our experience. And as long as that communication is true and honest, and being considerate of that person, I think it's very easy to get that communication with the parents as well. Will they receive it? Some will, and some won't. Are you going to change those parents that won't? Probably not. Probably not. But what your responsibility is to give them honest and direct communication about a situation. And it also depends on what they're hyper about. You know, is it their kids' playing time? Well, that's pretty easy to handle when you've got a group of kids, and depending on the level, if you're playing high-level club, it's selective. It's based on the coach's assessment of the players. If you're doing under 8 recreation, everybody's supposed to get the same time, it's pretty easy to deal with as well. Does that help?
Just curious.
Okay. Yep.
I've heard you talk a little bit about this before, but could you maybe talk about creating the culture of practice and training as a opportunity and privilege as opposed to a right or something that players have to do?
Sure. Sure, I'll start with the first part of that, because I think this is also an important part of the communication. One of the things that it's important that we communicate with the players, especially new players that are coming into the culture of what is it that you value? What is the standard by which you act? And one of the things that we have for us is that time is a very important component of what we do, that we value time. That I think everybody would agree that as a group, to get a group together, you need to show up at the same time, or else you can't really train. You can't perform. You can't practice. So you need everybody together at a certain time. So if we start at a certain time, it's important that everybody shows up at that time. And what we tell our players that if you don't show up at that time, you don't earn the opportunity to train. It's a privilege to train, and that's part of it, is that you need to show up on time. And our players understand that, and if they don't show up on time, their responsibility that day is to help facilitate training. And we feel strongly about that. What we know about time, what I believe about time, it's a great democracy of life. Great democracy of life. When you woke up this morning, how many hours did you get? 24. 24. The president woke up this morning, he got 24. There was probably a beggar on the street that woke up this morning and he gets 24. So we all get 24 hours. The question is, how do we use those 24 hours? How do we manage those 24 hours, and how do we handle it? how you handle it will oftentimes dictate your success in life. That if you manage it well, and the ones that do are usually the most successful, the ones that don't manage it well and waste it are usually the ones that don't. So for us, and especially when you're playing a 90-minute game, that you have to manage the time, that we want to help them responsibly manage their time. Part of that is, hey, look, we have to do this as a group and show up on time. That's part of our culture. But again, communication-wise, it's so important that the players are clear on, for your group and your team, what are the standards. And how you communicate that is so important that everybody's on the same page. Any other questions? Yes?
Ken, you were All-State in high school, All-American in college, and a tremendous coach. But there's another side to you. You're an All-American dad and husband. Tell us about that balance. How do you maintain that?
He's my marketing director.
Give him a book.
I have many.
Yeah, hug and love and feed him.
No, I might have talked about it last year, if not possibly the year before, but it is something that is important to me, is that there is a balance. You know, that we are so passionate about what we do. Look, if you guys weren't passionate, you wouldn't spend your weekend here, would you? I mean, if you weren't passionate about the game, you wouldn't give up your weekend and drive from Erie, Pennsylvania, or St. Louis, or wherever, Nashville, or wherever you're coming from, to spend, you know, a day and a half here. The balance of that is critical. Is that we, our passion doesn't bleed over to obsession. Because when that passion bleeds into obsession, then it becomes a very unbalanced and unhealthy life. That's my perspective. Because in the end, and I talked a little bit about this earlier, is our legacy is what we leave behind in the kids that we coach, but most importantly, my family. And if I end up having my obsession in the coaching unbalance my life so that I'm not spending it with my kids and my wife, then I'm missing the big picture. And one of the ways that I've learned to do it is to incorporate them in the soccer. That's why when you see here that my children are around it, Tina's involved in it, and that it ends up being a partnership in what we're doing and not something I'm doing, but we are doing. And when you partner with somebody like I have, it becomes much more fulfilling, but also it's much more powerful. What we can accomplish together is so significantly more because we are in it together. So, you know, I believe in the balance of it, and it has to be a balance in my life for me to be successful. And I'm so thankful for Tina that keeps me in check. There's sometimes I come home and she says, your daughter needs a date with you. I probably wouldn't have seen it and noticed it. But Tina continues to make sure that when it's appropriate and timely and necessary, that I have a date with my daughter as well. And Tina occasionally as well.